The realtor kept lowering the price, but nobody wanted the property. It sat there on 12 acres of dry Nevada land, with a farmhouse so worn down that the porch had collapsed into itself. The windows were either broken or boarded up. The roof sagged in 3 different places. When Thomas Kellerman finally saw the listing online, the price had dropped to $42,000. Even then, he hesitated. He was a mechanic from Reno, 38 years old, with 2 kids and a mortgage that already kept him up at night. His wife Marie worked part-time at a grocery store. They were not in a position to take risks, but Thomas had grown up in rural areas, and he knew land. 12 acres for that price meant something was either very wrong with the property or someone just needed to get rid of it fast. He called the realtor and asked why it was so cheap. The realtor said the previous owner had passed away without heirs, the estate wanted it gone, and the house was barely standing. Thomas asked if he could walk the land. The realtor said sure, but warned him the place had been empty since the early 90s. Thomas drove out on a Saturday morning. The property was an hour outside of Reno, past where the suburbs thinned out into nothing but sagebrush and distant mountains. He pulled up to a dirt road that cut through the acreage and parked near the farmhouse. The structure looked worse in person. The wood siding was bleached grey and splitting. Part of the roof had caved in on the eastern side. There were no neighbours in sight, just open land, rocks and dry soil. Thomas walked around the perimeter first. The land was flat and featureless. No water source that he could see, no wells, no outbuildings except for a half-collapsed shed about 50 yards from the house. He checked the shed first. Inside were rusted tools, rotted burlap sacks, and the skeletal remains of an old tractor that had been stripped for parts long ago. Nothing useful. He walked back toward the house and stepped carefully onto what remained of the porch. The front door was unlocked. He pushed it open, and the hinges screamed. The smell hit him immediately. Mildew, dust, and decay. The interior was gutted. Wallpaper hung in strips. The floorboards were warped and stained. In the kitchen, the cabinets had been torn off the walls. Pipes jutted out where a sink used to be. He moved through the rooms slowly, testing the floor with each step. Upstairs was worse. The ceiling had a gaping hole, and he could see daylight through the roof. He did not go up. Instead, he went back down and walked toward the back of the house, where a narrow staircase led into a basement. The stairs were wooden and felt spongy under his weight. He used his phone as a flashlight. The basement was small, maybe 10 by 12 feet, with a dirt floor and stone walls that were crumbling in places. There were a few shelves along one wall, empty except for broken jars and an old kerosene lamp. Thomas stood there for a moment, sweeping the light across the space. He was about to leave when he noticed something odd. In the far corner, near the base of the wall, the dirt looked different. It was darker, more compact, as if it had been disturbed and then packed down again. He crouched and touched it. The soil was hard but not natural. It had been tamped. He went back to his truck and grabbed a small folding shovel he kept in the bed. He returned to the basement and started scraping at the spot. Within a few minutes, the blade hit something solid, not rock, metal. He cleared more dirt away and saw the edge of a metal container. It was rectangular, maybe the size of a large toolbox, and it was buried about a foot deep. He dug around it carefully, then pried it loose. The container was heavy. He dragged it into the center of the basement floor and wiped the dirt off the top. It was an old ammunition box, military style, with a latched lid. The latch was rusted but intact. He flipped it open. Inside were stacks of bills, old bills, 20s, 50s, hundreds. They were bundled with rubber bands that had dried out and cracked. Underneath the first layer were more stacks. Thomas sat back on his heels and stared. He did not count it right away. He just looked at it, trying to understand what he was seeing. His first thought was that it was fake. His second thought was that it was real, and he was about to have a very complicated problem. He pulled out one of the bundles and held it up to the light from his phone. The bills looked authentic. They were worn but not torn. The serial numbers were legible. He put the bundle back and closed the lid. His hands were shaking. He sat there in the dirt for a long time, listening to his own breathing. Then he carried the box up the stairs, out of the house, and put it in the bed of his truck. He covered it with a tarp and drove home. Marie was in the kitchen when he walked in. She asked how the property looked. He said it was a wreck. She asked if he was still interested. He said maybe. Then he told her to come out to the truck. She followed him outside, confused. He pulled back the tarp and opened the ammunition box. She looked inside and did not say anything for several seconds. Then she asked where he got it. He told her. She asked if he was serious. He said yes. She closed the lid and looked at him. She asked what they were going to do. He said he did not know yet. They brought the box inside and put it on the dining room table. Thomas started pulling out the bundles and laying them in rows. Marie found a pen and paper and started writing down denominations. It took them over an hour to count everything. The total came to $187,000. Thomas did not sleep that night. He lay in bed thinking about where the money came from, who it belonged to, and whether he had just committed a crime by taking it. Marie was calmer. She said the property was for sale. The money was buried on the property, and if he bought the land, then anything on it would be his. Thomas was not sure that was how the law worked. The next morning, he called a lawyer he knew from the shop, a guy who had helped him with a contract dispute a few years earlier. He did not give details. He just asked a hypothetical question. If someone bought property and found something valuable on it after the sale, who owned it? The lawyer said it depended. If the item was considered abandoned or part of the estate, it would transfer with the property. If it was stolen or the original owner could be identified, it might have to be returned. Thomas thanked him and hung up. He decided to buy the property first and figure out the rest later. He contacted the realtor and made an offer, $40,000 cash. The realtor said the estate would probably accept. Thomas asked how fast they could close. The realtor said 2 weeks if there were no complications. Thomas said he wanted to move quickly. The realtor agreed to push it through. During those 2 weeks, Thomas did not touch the money. He kept it in the ammunition box in his bedroom closet. He did not tell anyone else, not his parents, not his brother, not his co-workers. Marie told her sister, but swore her to secrecy. Thomas spent his evenings researching property law and treasure trove statutes in Nevada. What he found was not reassuring. The laws were murky. Some cases said finders keepers, others said the original owner or their estate had rights. There was no clear answer. He also started looking into the history of the property. The previous owner had been a man named Carl Drennan, who had lived alone on the property for most of his adult life. He had no children, no surviving siblings, and no will. The estate had been handled by a distant cousin who wanted nothing to do with the land. Thomas tried to find out more about Drennan, but there was not much available. A few old phone book entries, a single obituary in a local paper that said he had been a laborer and a veteran, no mention of wealth or criminal activity, no arrests, no lawsuits, just a quiet man who lived in the middle of nowhere. The sale closed on schedule. Thomas became the legal owner of 12 acres and a collapsing farmhouse. He drove out to the property the day after signing the papers and walked the land again, this time as the owner. He felt no different. The house was still falling apart. The land was still barren. But the money was real, and now it was his. At least he hoped it was. He decided to take one bundle of bills to a bank in Carson City, a place where nobody knew him. He told the teller he had inherited some old currency and wanted to know if it was still valid. The teller examined the bills and said they were legitimate. She asked where he got them. He said from a relative. She accepted that and processed the deposit. He walked out with a receipt for $2,000. That was the proof he needed. The money was real and it was accepted. Over the next month, he deposited the rest in small amounts at different banks across northern Nevada. He kept the transactions under $10,000 to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. He opened new accounts under his name and Marie's name. He used different banks in different towns. He spread it out. By the end of the second month, all $187,000 had been converted into legitimate bank deposits. The first thing Thomas did was pay off the mortgage on their house in Reno. That was $53,000. The weight that lifted off his shoulders was immediate. For the first time in years, he did not wake up thinking about the payment due at the end of the month. Marie cried when he showed her the payoff statement. She had been carrying that stress just as long as he had. Next, He paid off both their cars. That was another $18,000. Then he paid off Marie's medical debt from a surgery she had 2 years earlier. That was $9,000. He set aside $20,000 for the kids' education. He put $15,000 into a retirement account. He paid off credit cards, old utility bills, and a loan he had taken from his brother. When he was done, they had $60,000 left. Thomas wanted to be smart with it. He did not quit his job. He did not buy anything flashy. He kept working at the shop, and Marie kept her shifts at the grocery store. They told people they had received an inheritance from a distant relative of Thomas's who had passed away. Nobody questioned it. Inheritances were common enough. The story was believable. Life went on. But Thomas could not stop thinking about the property. He went back several times over the next few months, walking the land, checking the house, looking for anything else that might have been hidden. He searched the basement again, dug in other corners, checked under floorboards, tapped walls. He found nothing at first. Whatever Carl Drennan had buried, the ammunition box seemed to be it. But Thomas was thorough. He had a feeling there was more. The property was 12 acres. The house had a basement. There was a collapsed shed. There had to be other hiding places. He started thinking about where someone would hide something valuable if they wanted it to stay hidden for decades. Not in the house, where it could be found during a search or renovation, not in plain sight, somewhere outside, somewhere permanent. Thomas walked the property line again. This time he paid attention to the landscape. Most of the land was flat and featureless, but there was a small rise on the western edge, maybe 100 yards from the house. It was barely noticeable, just a gentle slope covered in sagebrush and rocks. Thomas walked up to it and started looking around. The ground was hard and dry. There were no obvious signs of disturbance, but something about the spot felt deliberate. It was the highest point on the property. It had a clear view of the house and the road. It would be easy to find again if you knew what you were looking for. Thomas started digging. He used a pickaxe this time, breaking through the hard-packed soil. After about 20 minutes, he hit something solid. Not metal this time, stone. He cleared the dirt away and found a flat rock about 2 feet across, sitting on top of what looked like a makeshift stone chamber. He pried the rock loose and looked inside. There were 3 canvas bags. They were old, stained, and partially rotted. Thomas pulled the first one out carefully. It was heavy. He opened it and saw gold coins, dozens of them. They were tarnished but unmistakable. American gold eagles, double eagles, St. Gordons. He recognized them from coin shows he had attended as a kid. He opened the second bag. More coins. The third bag had something different. Bars. Small gold bars, maybe 2 ounces each, stamped with purity marks and serial numbers. Thomas sat down in the dirt and tried to process what he was looking at. This was not cash. This was gold. Real gold. And there was a lot of it. He carefully loaded the bags into his truck and drove home. He did not tell Marie right away. He needed to understand what he had found first. That night, after the kids were asleep, Thomas spread the contents of the bags on the dining room table. Marie walked in and stopped in her tracks. She asked what it was. Thomas said gold. She asked where he got it. He told her about the rise on the western edge of the property. She sat down and picked up one of the coins. She turned it over in her hands, examining the markings. She asked how much it was worth. Thomas said he did not know yet, but it was a lot. They spent the next few hours counting and cataloging everything. There were 214 gold coins of various denominations. There were 18 small gold bars. Thomas did some quick research online and found current gold prices. Based on weight and purity, the gold was worth approximately $340,000. Combined with the cash he had already found, Thomas had discovered over $500,000 in buried wealth on a property he had bought for $40,000. The next morning, Thomas called a coin dealer in Las Vegas. He said he had inherited some gold coins and wanted to know about selling them. The dealer asked what he had. Thomas described a few of the coins without mentioning the quantity. The dealer said he would be interested in buying them and asked Thomas to bring them in for an appraisal. Thomas said he would think about it. He did not want to sell everything at once. He did not want to attract attention. He decided to sell the gold slowly over time to different dealers in different cities. He would claim it was an inheritance. He would spread the sales out. He would be careful. Over the next year, Thomas sold the gold piece by piece. He drove to coin shops in California, Arizona, and Utah. He never sold more than $10,000 worth at a time. He always paid cash for the trips. He always used different dealers. He kept meticulous records of every sale. By the end of the year, he had converted all of the gold into cash. After taxes and fees, he netted $290,000. Thomas and Marie now had a total of $477,000 from the two discoveries. They had already paid off their debts with the first find. Now they had a decision to make. What to do with the rest? Thomas wanted to invest it. Marie wanted to use some of it to improve their quality of life. They compromised. They kept $100,000 in savings as an emergency fund. They invested $200,000 in a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds. They used $50,000 to renovate their house. They set aside $77,000 for future opportunities. The renovations were modest: a new roof, new windows, updated kitchen appliances, a fresh coat of paint. Nothing that would raise eyebrows or questions. They told neighbors they had saved up for years. Nobody doubted it. Thomas continued working at the shop. Marie continued working at the grocery store. But now they were working because they wanted to, not because they had to. That freedom changed everything. Thomas started thinking about the man who had buried the fortune, Carl Drennan. He became obsessed with understanding why Drennan had hidden so much wealth and never used it. He spent hours researching Drennan's background. What he found was a picture of a man who had lived through hard times and never trusted banks. Drennan had been born in the Great Depression. He had grown up poor. He had served in World War II. After the war, he had worked in mining and construction. He had saved every penny. In the early 60s, when gold ownership became legal again for American citizens, Drennan had started buying gold. He bought coins. He bought small bars. He converted his savings into something tangible, something that could not be taken away by a bank failure or government seizure. He had been preparing for another depression, another collapse. It never came. And Drennan had lived the rest of his life alone, guarding his wealth, never spending it. Thomas found records showing that Drennan had purchased the Nevada property with cash in the early 60s, right around the time gold ownership restrictions were lifted. It all made sense. Drennan had been a prepper before that term existed. He had been someone who believed in hard assets and self-reliance, someone who trusted gold more than paper currency, someone who had prepared for the worst and never needed his preparations. Thomas felt a strange connection to Drennan. They were both men who valued security, who understood that the world could change in an instant, who believed in being prepared. The difference was that Drennan had never gotten to enjoy the fruits of his preparation. Thomas would. He would use the money wisely. He would build something lasting. He would make sure his family was taken care of. He would honor Drennan's sacrifice, even if Drennan never intended it as a gift. The money and gold had been buried for decades, waiting, and Thomas had been the one to find it. That meant something. It meant he was supposed to have it. It meant he was supposed to use it, and he would. As the months passed, Thomas and Marie adjusted to their new financial reality. They were not wealthy, but they were secure. They could afford things they had never been able to afford before. A family vacation to Yellowstone, new clothes for the kids, a better car for Marie. Small luxuries that made life easier and more enjoyable. But they were careful not to change too much too fast. They kept their same house. They kept their same jobs. They kept their same routine. The only difference was that they no longer felt the constant pressure of financial stress. They could breathe. They could plan. They could think about the future without fear. Thomas started taking night classes in business management. He was thinking about opening his own shop someday. Marie started taking accounting courses at the community college. She had always been good with numbers. Now she was developing that skill into something more. They were building towards something. They were using the money as a foundation, not a finish line. Thomas also became more involved in his kids' lives. Before the discovery, he had been working so many hours that he barely saw them. He would leave for work before they woke up and come home after they went to bed. He was providing for them, but he was not present. Now he could afford to cut back his hours. He started coaching his son's Little League team. He started helping his daughter with her homework. He attended school events and parent-teacher conferences. He was there, and his kids noticed. They started coming to him with questions and problems. They started trusting him more. The relationship he was building with them was worth more than any amount of money. But the money had made it possible. That was the real value of the discovery, not the dollars themselves, but the time and freedom those dollars provided. Marie had a similar experience. She had been working at the grocery store out of necessity, not choice. She had missed years of her kids' lives because she had to work. Now she could reduce her hours. She could be there when the kids got home from school. She could help with projects and activities. She could be present. And being present changed everything. Her relationship with her daughter, which had been strained by her constant absence, started to heal. Her daughter started talking to her again, started sharing her life, started trusting her. Marie realized that the money had given her something more valuable than financial security. It had given her back her family. Thomas continued to visit the Nevada property regularly. He could not shake the feeling that there might be more. He had found the ammunition box in the basement. He had found the gold on the western rise. But the property was 12 acres. There were other potential hiding spots. He searched the collapsed shed more thoroughly. He dug around the foundation of the house. He checked the land near the old fence line. He found nothing, but he kept looking. It became a kind of ritual. Every few weeks he would drive out to the property and spend a few hours searching. He never told Marie about these trips. She thought he was just checking on the land. She did not know he was still looking for more buried treasure. And Thomas was fine with that. The search gave him something to focus on, something to hope for. Even if he never found anything else, the act of looking was meaningful. One afternoon, about 18 months after buying the property, Thomas was walking near the old fence line on the southern edge of the land. He noticed a cluster of rocks that seemed out of place. They were arranged in a pattern, almost like a cairn. He walked over and started moving the rocks. Underneath was another flat stone, similar to the one he had found on the western rise. He lifted it and found a smaller canvas bag. Inside were more gold coins, not as many as before. Maybe 30 or 40, but still significant. Thomas sat down and laughed. Drennan had been more paranoid than he thought. The old man had not just hidden his wealth in 1 or 2 spots. He had spread it across the entire property, multiple caches, multiple backups. It was brilliant, and it meant that Thomas might never find everything. There could be more bags buried somewhere on the 12 acres, more coins, more bars, more cash. The property was a treasure map, and Thomas was just beginning to read it. He took the new bag home and added the coins to his collection. He did not tell Marie about this find either. He was starting to keep a separate account of the discoveries, a private ledger. He told himself it was because he did not want to overwhelm her, because he wanted to be sure of what he had before he shared it. But the truth was more complicated. He liked having a secret. He liked knowing that there was more wealth out there waiting to be found. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like he was in control of his destiny, and it gave him a reason to keep searching, to keep hoping, to keep digging. Over the next few years, Thomas found 2 more small caches on the property, one near the old well, one buried under a dead tree stump. Each cache contained between 20 and 50 gold coins. By the time he stopped finding new caches, he had discovered an additional 160 coins beyond the original haul. The total value of all the gold he found was over $450,000. Combined with the original cache discovery, Thomas had pulled over $640,000 in wealth from a property he had bought for $40,000. It was an extraordinary return, and it had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. Thomas eventually sold the Nevada property. He had no intention of building on it or living there. It had served its purpose. He contacted a developer and sold the land for $90,000. The developer planned to subdivide it and sell smaller parcels to people looking for rural getaways. Thomas did not care what happened to it. He had taken everything of value. He had searched every inch of that land multiple times. If there was anything left, it was buried so deep or hidden so well that it might as well not exist. He signed the papers, took the check, and walked away. In total, he had turned a $40,000 investment into $730,000 in cash, gold, and property sales, and he had done it quietly, carefully, and legally. Nobody knew the full extent of what he had found, nobody except Marie, and even she did not know about some of the later discoveries. Thomas kept those to himself, his own private insurance policy, his own secret stash. If you've ever wondered what might be hidden beneath your own feet, you're not alone. Fortunes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they wait in silence, buried under layers of time and dirt until the right person comes along. That's what Fortune Beneath is all about. Real discoveries, real people, and real money found in places nobody thought to look. If you're hooked on stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. There's a lot more buried out there, and we're just getting started digging. Thomas used the money to build the life he had always wanted. He opened his own automotive repair shop. He bought the building outright. No mortgage, no debt. He hired skilled mechanics and paid them well. He built a reputation for honest work and fair prices. Within a few years, his shop was one of the most respected in Reno. He was making good money, but more importantly, he was his own boss. He was building something that would last, something that could be passed down to his kids if they wanted it. Marie finished her degree and got a job at an accounting firm. She was good at her work and quickly moved up. She was making more money than she ever had at the grocery store. She enjoyed the challenge. She enjoyed using her mind. The buried wealth had given her the opportunity to change careers, and she had taken full advantage of it. Their kids grew up without knowing the full story of where the money came from. They knew their parents had received an inheritance. They knew their dad owned a successful business. They knew their mom had a good job. But they did not know about the ammunition box in the basement. They did not know about the gold coins buried on a hillside. They did not know about the multiple caches spread across 12 acres of Nevada desert. And Thomas was fine with that. Some secrets were meant to be kept. Some stories were too complicated to tell. The important thing was that his kids had opportunities he never had. They could go to college without worrying about debt. They could pursue careers they loved, not just jobs that paid the bills. They could build lives of meaning and purpose. That was the real legacy of the buried treasure. Not the money itself, but what the money had made possible. Thomas and Marie invested the majority of their wealth. They worked with a financial advisor and built a diversified portfolio. Stocks, bonds, real estate investment trusts, and a small allocation to precious metals. They were not trying to get rich, they were trying to preserve and grow what they had found. They were thinking long-term. They were thinking about retirement. They were thinking about their grandchildren. The money that had been buried for decades would continue to grow and provide for generations. That was the power of compound interest. That was the power of patient, disciplined investing. Thomas had learned these lessons the hard way. He had learned that money was a tool, not a toy, that wealth had to be managed, protected, and respected. He taught these lessons to his kids. He showed them his portfolio. He explained how investing worked. He wanted them to understand that wealth was not about luck or chance. It was about making smart decisions and sticking with them over time. As Thomas grew older, he thought often about Carl Drennan, about the man who had worked hard, saved diligently, and prepared for a disaster that never came. Drennan had spent his entire life building a fortune and never enjoyed it. He had lived alone in a collapsing house on barren land, guarding his wealth like a dragon guarding gold. And then he had passed away, and all of that wealth had gone to a stranger. Thomas wondered if Drennan would have been happy about that, if he would have approved of how Thomas used the money. Thomas liked to think he would have. That Drennan would have respected the fact that Thomas was careful, disciplined, and smart with the wealth. That Thomas had not wasted it or squandered it. That Thomas had used it to build something lasting. That was the best way to honor Drennan's memory. Not by leaving the money buried, but by putting it to work, by using it to create value and opportunity. Thomas retired at 58. He sold his shop to one of his employees, a mechanic he had trained and trusted. The sale price was over $1 million. Combined with his investments and savings, Thomas was worth well over $2 million. He and Marie bought a small cabin in the mountains near Lake Tahoe. They spent their time hiking, reading, and enjoying the quiet. They traveled when they wanted to. They visited their kids and grandkids. They lived simply and happily. They never forgot where they came from. They never forgot the basement, the ammunition box, the gold coins, or the man who had buried them. But they also did not dwell on it. It was part of their past, a chapter in their story. But not the whole story. The whole story was about what they had done with the opportunity they had been given. And what they had done was build a life worth living. A life filled with love, purpose, and security. A life that was theirs. The ammunition box that had started it all sat on a shelf in Thomas's office. It was empty now, but it was still there, a reminder of where the journey had begun. Thomas would look at it sometimes and remember the moment he had opened the lid, the moment his hands had been shaking, the moment he had realized his life was about to change. That moment had been over 20 years ago now, and everything that had come after, the wealth, the business, the security, the freedom, all of it traced back to that single decision. The decision to dig, the decision to keep digging, the decision to believe that there was more out there waiting to be found. Thomas had been right. There had been more, and he had found it. And that had made all the difference. Discoveries like Thomas's happen more often than most people realize. Across the country, in basements, attics, backyards, and forgotten properties, there are fortunes waiting to be found. Some are small, a few $100s in a wall, a gold coin in a jar. Others are life-changing. Stacks of bills, buried gold, hidden caches spread across 12 acres. Each discovery has a story. Each story has a person who took the chance, made the effort, and found what no one else had found. And each of those stories proves the same thing. Fortune is beneath, sometimes literally. And if you're willing to dig, you might just find it. So before you go, take a second to subscribe, hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the next story could be yours. And when it is, you'll want to remember where you heard it first, right here, on Fortune Beneath. The story of Thomas Kellerman and the farmhouse nobody wanted is a reminder that wealth does not always announce itself. It does not always glitter in the sunlight or sit in a bank vault. Sometimes it is buried. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it is forgotten. And sometimes it takes one person, one shovel, and one decision to bring it back into the light. Thomas made that decision. He dug, he found, he kept, and he built a life that was better than anything he had imagined. That is the power of hidden wealth. That is the power of taking a chance. That is the power of fortune beneath.